In a world where clarity is often overshadowed by emotional manipulation, the struggle to think clearly becomes a battlefield. Picture this. If you could grasp your thoughts for just 10 seconds, you'd realize how many actions you take are rooted in fear and societal pressure. What if the key to your freedom lies in your ability to think clearly? You would no longer agree out of anxiety, remain silent due to courtesy, or pursue ambitions that don't truly belong to you. You would stop seeking validation from those who secretly wish for your downfall, and most crucially, you would cease to make choices that undermine your own interests. The unfortunate reality is that many have been conditioned to equate activity with purpose and feelings with facts. Yet, Machiavelli, the master of strategic thought, thrived on clarity, unyielding clarity. If you adopt his mindset, not only will your choices sharpen, but each error you sidestep will amplify your power. So let's delve into this. The core issue isn't that people fail to think. Rather, they often think in the wrong direction. Typically, emotions take precedence, followed by attempts to justify them logically. If the complexity of this concept truly blew your mind, click the like button in support of this profound inquiry. Don't let the algorithm decide what you see. Subscribe now and hit the bell to guarantee you catch our next big story. Someone feels slighted, and they concoct a rationale for revenge. They experience anxiety and convince themselves of an imminent threat. Attraction leads to the creation of virtues to rationalize their feelings. The emotion precedes the reasoning, and if your emotional compass is off, your logic is doomed from the start. This is where Machiavelli flips the script entirely. He begins not with feelings, but with desired outcomes. What do I wish to achieve? What must I safeguard? What should I steer clear of? Only after establishing these priorities does he allow emotions to enter the equation. But by then, they are merely tools, not rulers. This leads us to the first principle of clear thinking. Distinguish the useful from the truthful. Not every truth serves a purpose, and not everything useful is completely true. When you obsess over truth as an absolute, you lose sight of the fact that decision-making is about outcomes, not mere reality. Machiavelli recognized this, which is why he asserted that projecting virtue is often more critical than embodying it. It's not about deception. It's about understanding that perceptions shape responses. In the realm of power, people react not to truth, but to their beliefs. Have you ever felt controlled by your own emotions? To think clearly, abandon the quest for certainty. Instead, seek clarity about the consequences of your beliefs. Ask yourself, if I accept this, where does it lead? This simple pivot can cause weak ideas to collapse under their own weight. Yet clarity isn't solely about dismissing falsehoods. It also involves resisting information overload. In today's fast-paced environment, clear thinking is less about amassing information and more about fortifying your mental boundaries. Many suffer from what I term mental saturation bias, mistakenly believing that more input equates to better decisions. They inundate themselves with videos, articles, and opinions, only to find themselves paralyzed by the cacophony of others' thoughts when it's time to make a choice. Machiavelli would label this intellectual dependency. You lose faith in your judgment and start borrowing the thoughts of others. The harsh reality is that each additional voice you allow into your mind makes it increasingly difficult to hear your own. Without that internal guidance, you risk pursuing goals that hold no real value for you. This brings us to the second rule of Machiavellian clarity: filter ruthlessly and reflect selectively. Before absorbing new information, ask yourself two critical questions. Does this source have something at stake? Will this information influence my next move? If the answers are both no, disregard it. Clear thinkers don't require more data. They need sharper filters. Once you adopt this approach, your decision-making enters a new realm. You'll begin to realize that many confuse options with opportunities. Just because something is available doesn't mean it's valuable. The world is filled with tempting options designed to distract you. Jobs that provide just enough to keep you from pursuing your own ventures. Relationships that offer mere comfort to prevent your growth, and distractions that numb you enough to make clarity seem painful. Imagine a life where your decisions are driven by clarity, not confusion. A clear thinker doesn't chase what's readily accessible. They seek what aligns with their true goals. Now, take a moment to grasp this. The gravest error a muddled thinker can make is mistaking open-mindedness for indecision. Open-mindedness is about evaluating diverse ideas, while indecisiveness is rooted in a fear of commitment. The world often rewards this indecisiveness, masquerading as flexibility. Machiavelli would scoff at the notion of neutrality as a virtue. He recognized that neutrality often cloaks fear. To safeguard your power, you must make decisions even when you're not entirely comfortable. Why? Because true clarity rarely precedes action. It emerges through it. Clarity is achieved by moving forward, observing resistance, and adapting accordingly. Thus, the third principle of Machiavellian decision-making is that clarity is iterative, not instantaneous. Those who wait for certainty before acting are often devoured by those who take action and refine their approach. Machiavelli wasn't infallible, but his decisiveness made him formidable. Yet, even the most astute mind can be ensnared by a force more potent than logic: urgency. This is where many falter, not due to flawed reasoning, but because their timing is manipulated. When pressed for time, clarity evaporates. This is why many power plays unfold under artificial deadlines, pushing you to act before you've fully contemplated. Sign this now. Respond immediately. Decide today. But urgency often serves as a tactic of manipulation at high speed. Machiavelli understood this deeply, which is why he counseled rulers to create urgency for others while never succumbing to it themselves. So how can you maintain your clarity when the clock is ticking? You must train your reflex to delay. When you feel the pressure, don't ask, "What should I do?" Instead, inquire, "Who stands to gain if I act quickly?" But that pivotal question elevates your perspective, allowing you to rise above the chaos of the game. If urgency is wielded as a weapon against you, then the art of delay transforms into your protective barrier. Let's shift our focus, though, because clarity isn't solely about what you avoid. It also encompasses what you actively construct. One of Machiavelli's most overlooked tactics for enhancing thought processes was employing mental contrast. He didn't merely assess the potential rewards of an action, he also scrutinized its possible repercussions. While many people fixate on the benefits, the thrill, the accolades, the gains, Machiavellian clarity requires a different approach. What is the worst that could happen if this goes awry? And crucially, would I be able to bounce back from it? This mindset doesn't breed paranoia. It fosters preparedness. Our culture often glamorizes risk-takers, yet the truly dangerous thinkers are not mere gamblers. They are calculated strategists. Every move they make is meticulously planned, weighing not only the potential gains but also their chances of survival. That's why Machiavelli didn't solely contemplate victory. He considered what he could withstand if he faced defeat. This principle forms the essence of clear thinking. It transcends merely making correct choices. It revolves around making resilient ones. You can only make those resilient choices by being brutally honest with yourself, devoid of idealism or excessive optimism. This is where many falter in their pursuit of clarity, as they shy away from confronting their true motives. They yearn for their decisions to emanate nobility, purity, or goodness. However, Machiavelli was indifferent to whether a decision appeared virtuous. What mattered to him was its functionality. He understood that a decision that seems pristine but leaves you powerless is not moral. It is self-destructive. Thus, before making any significant choice, ask yourself this: am I pursuing this to feel good, or am I safeguarding my power? Often, the seemingly noble choice can ensnare you, while the one that appears selfish may actually preserve your freedom. Do you grasp the implications of this? Thinking clearly isn't merely an intellectual exercise. It's a commitment to prioritizing your own advantage. Each time you compromise that advantage for the sake of being liked or approved, your clarity diminishes, and your decisions suffer in silence. But there's a path forward, a series of practices that Machiavelli would have employed to cultivate a level of internal clarity so precise that external distractions would hold no sway. This begins with safeguarding the very structure of your mind. It's not just about the content of your thoughts, but also the manner in which you think. For many, clarity is obscured not by ignorance, but by pervasive noise. This relentless stream of dopamine-driven distractions rewires your brain. It alters your priorities without you even realizing it. Your mind ceases to be a bastion of strength and instead becomes a corridor. Any idea can stroll in, any distraction can take a seat, and every decision morphs into a negotiation with unwelcome impulses. Machiavelli would have termed this mental vulnerability, and like any astute strategist, he would never engage in battle with an exposed mind. Which argument do you think is the weakest, and why? Challenge us in the comments. Let's discuss this below. So how do you fortify it? You start by eliminating what he would label mental saboteurs, these subtle, unseen forces that deplete your decision-making power before you even step into the arena. One of the most insidious is constant context switching. Each time you flit from one app to another, from one feed to the next, you fracture your focus, erode your resolve, and reduce clarity to mere dust. Over time, this becomes a permanent state. You may believe you're multitasking, but in reality, you're self-fragmenting. And fragmented minds are not equipped to make robust decisions. They tend to react impulsively. That's why the sharpest thinkers don't merely manage their time. They manage their mental state. They defend their cognitive environment as fiercely as a king protects his throne room. You wouldn't devise a battle plan in a bustling marketplace, right? So why do people make life-altering decisions amid a cacophony of notifications and emotional turmoil? Machiavelli would chuckle at the modern individual, endlessly scrolling for clarity, tapping for purpose, and wondering why his mind feels so vacant. Clarity isn't discovered in constant motion. It emerges in deliberate solitude. And not the kind that breeds sadness, but the strategic kind. When you find yourself alone, not lonely, but intentionally solitary, you begin to discern your thoughts without external interference. You reconnect with your core values. You remember what it feels like to make decisions from an authentic place, rather than being swayed by trends, societal pressure, or imitation. This is where Machiavellian thinking gains its true potency. The capacity to generate mental silence while the world clamors around you. Yet silence alone is insufficient. Once you've cleared the mental landscape, you must construct upon it. The first foundational question to ask is, what am I optimizing for? Not what you desire, nor what feels gratifying, but what you are fundamentally structuring your thoughts to achieve. Most individuals never clarify this. Their decisions become incoherent because their objectives remain undefined. One day they pursue peace, the next day dominance, then love, and after that, revenge. Their minds engage in civil war, and they mistakenly label it as being open to possibilities. But true clarity necessitates a hierarchy. You cannot serve multiple masters. You must select a singular goal that governs all your other decisions, and then ruthlessly eliminate anything that detracts from it. This encapsulates Machiavelli's mindset, which operates not in a realm of endless possibilities, but within the bounds of strategic limitations. He didn't ponder what was ideal. He questioned what was feasible given the circumstances. He understood that clarity does not arise from envisioning a perfect world. It stems from grasping the realities of your actual situation and mastering it. So ask yourself, are your decisions based on your true circumstances or on an idealized version of where you wish to be? Here's the harsh truth. Many of your poor decisions stem not from flawed analysis, but from incorrect assumptions. You presumed you had more time, more loyalty, more leverage. And when those assumptions crumbled, your clarity vanished alongside them. Machiavelli would caution that self-delusion is the enemy of clarity, particularly when it comes to your own misconceptions. It's simple to identify deceit in others, yet your own mind acts as a fortress, fiercely guarding your cherished illusions. You may overlook warning signs, inflate your own appeal, and convince yourself that effort alone secures rewards. You craft narratives for comfort, but these comforting tales come at a hefty price. This is precisely why one of the highest forms of mental clarity is the act of self-disillusionment. It's the ability to strip away the comforting fictions and confront the stark reality that remains. Once you accomplish this, your decisions shift from being driven by hope to being rooted in strategy. You stop reacting to the world as you wish it were and start responding to it as it truly is. But what happened next was enlightening. When you consistently maintain this clear, grounded mindset, people may begin to perceive you as almost prophetic. They might think you possess some unique insight, but in truth, you've simply cleared away the fog of emotional reactivity, over-attachment, and false urgency. From this vantage point, your mind transforms into a powerful tool. You no longer focus on what to do. Instead, you concentrate on what advances your position. You start to see the entire chessboard laid out before you, prioritizing leverage over opinions or narratives. As soon as your decisions begin to optimize for leverage, you find that clarity becomes almost addictive. You cease to ask, "Is this right?" and instead inquire, "Does this strengthen my position?" You stop fretting over immediate discomfort and start strategizing for long-term gains. You transition from negotiating with feelings to negotiating with facts. This shift doesn't render you heartless. It simply makes you honest. You come to realize that every misguided choice, every poor investment, every toxic relationship, and every regretful agreement stemmed from one fundamental flaw: making decisions based on emotion rather than leverage. Machiavelli's brilliance lay in his ability to perceive the world as it operates, rather than how it is morally interpreted. This perspective, while harsh, provides the clearest lens through which to view life when everything else is clouded. Now, allow me to introduce a subtle yet profoundly effective tactic that many overlook: It may not seem glamorous or motivational, but its impact is undeniable. The principle of reversal simulation. Before making any significant choice, Machiavelli would mentally reverse the scenario. He wouldn't merely ask, "What happens if I do this?" but also, "What are the consequences if I don't? What if I allow this situation to persist? What if I choose to walk away? What if I remain silent? What if I extend forgiveness?" Most individuals analyze actions, but rarely do they consider the ramifications of inaction. Machiavelli understood that some of life's most severe repercussions arise not from bold actions, but from quiet indecision, tolerating what should have been severed, remaining when one ought to depart, and hesitating when action is required. So the next time you find yourself in a dilemma, don't just envision the scenario unfolding forward. Contemplate it in reverse. What occurs if you choose to do nothing? What begins to decay? What opportunities fade into oblivion? What power is subtly siphoned away? The insights you gain from these reflections often resonate more profoundly than any list of pros and cons ever could. In that silence, you will uncover a clarity that most people diligently avoid because it lacks immediate gratification. It may not enhance your image, but it can make you formidable in the most advantageous manner. If you desire to delve deeper, there's a mental shift Machiavelli employed that sharpened his clarity to a predictive edge. This ability enabled him to foresee the actions of others before they even recognized them. Not because he possessed some supernatural insight, but because he grasped a harsh truth. People are more predictable than they realize. This is where clear thinking transitions from personal insight to tactical advantage. Once you've trained your mind to remain disciplined and unswayed by distractions, you can start to anticipate the behavior of others who haven't achieved the same clarity. This grants you a significant edge in decision-making since most individuals are not genuinely choosing. They are merely reacting to unseen patterns. Patterns that you can learn to recognize. Machiavelli didn't wait for adversaries to make their moves. He studied their fears, their pride, and their desire to appear strong. By understanding these factors, he could reliably predict their decisions, not perfectly, but consistently enough to maintain an advantage. Now, here's how you can apply this in your life. Begin observing the motivations behind others' decisions, and you will uncover the underlying patterns driving their actions. Is it the fear of appearing weak? Is it the need to validate themselves? Is it a sense of boredom masquerading as ambition? Once you identify the forces at play, their next steps will become apparent. Before making any major decision, ask not just what you desire, but also what they might fear you could do. This shift in perspective will expose vulnerabilities. For instance, during negotiations, while most individuals ponder, "What leverage do I hold?" a Machiavellian mindset asks, "What threat do they subconsciously fear I could pose?" You don't even need to act on it. Simply being aware of it alters how you communicate, how you position yourself, and how you frame discussions. When you approach situations through the lens of anticipated fears, you begin to guide outcomes without overt manipulation. This isn't about cruelty. It's clarity applied to real-world scenarios. The more adept you become at predicting others, the less likely you are to be taken by surprise. This was what Machiavelli consistently aimed for. Not control, but the ability to forecast. Forecasting fosters emotional detachment. You stop being shocked when betrayal, deception, or abandonment occurs. You come to expect it, not out of cynicism, but from a place of understanding. You comprehend the game, and players don't weep during the match. Yet, This level of clear thinking demands a price that many find daunting: intellectual loneliness. As your mind sharpens, you may begin to feel increasingly isolated. You will express thoughts that others struggle to grasp. What will you do when the clarity of your mind sets you apart from the crowd? Will you embrace the solitude that comes with it, or will you seek comfort in the noise of conformity? The choice is yours, but the stakes have never been higher. What will happen when your mental clarity distinguishes you from the masses? Will you embrace the loneliness that accompanies such insight, or will you seek solace in the comfort of conformity? The decision lies in your hands, and the implications have never been more significant. You'll start to notice nuances that others overlook. You'll take a moment to breathe while everyone else is in a frenzy. You'll detach yourself from situations where others desperately cling. You'll make decisions that others shy away from. And at times, it may feel as though you're the only rational individual in a sea of emotional turmoil. This is the cost of clarity. If you're not prepared to pay it, you may find yourself subconsciously undermining your own thoughts, softening them to be liked, second-guessing them for comfort, and muting your voice to remain relatable. Machiavelli would argue that it's better to be misunderstood yet powerful than to be understood and powerless. So you must confront this critical question: do you desire clarity, or do you prefer to seek approval? The two rarely coexist harmoniously. Surprisingly, as your thinking sharpens, your actions become more nuanced. You'll find that grand gestures are no longer necessary. You won't feel compelled to announce your intentions or over-explain your choices. You won't rush to justify your actions. Why is that? Because clarity fosters patience. You already have a sense of the outcome. You're merely waiting for others to catch up. This represents a unique form of power, the quiet kind. The most formidable thinkers are often the ones who remain silent, not because they lack insight, but because they are constantly strategizing what to withhold. This leads us to a skill that remains elusive for many, yet Machiavelli mastered it: mental layering. This skill allows you to hold multiple interpretations of a situation simultaneously, without succumbing to confusion. You don't merely observe what's happening, you analyze how it appears to others. You don't just consider your intentions, you anticipate how those intentions might be misinterpreted. You don't merely assess outcomes, you predict reactions to those outcomes and the subsequent responses to those reactions. This is the mindset of a tactician, a strategist, a true leader. It empowers you to navigate chaos without getting swept away by emotions. For instance, when faced with public criticism, most people react impulsively, defending themselves or engaging in arguments. However, a layered thinker pauses. They don't simply ask, "Is this true?" Instead, they ponder, "Why now? Who stands to gain from this statement? What message will my reaction convey?" They consider the long-term implications of remaining silent, often opting for a move that appears weak in the moment, but solidifies their position over time. This is the genuine Machiavellian advantage. It's not about winning the immediate battle, it's about controlling the overall momentum. Yet, this approach is easier said than done. You cannot adopt this mindset if your ego is in constant need of validation. If every situation feels like a threat to your identity, clear thinking will elude you. You'll react defensively, twisting logic to safeguard your pride and disregarding reality to uphold your narrative. Before making any decision, practice this essential discipline. Detach your ego from the outcome. Machiavelli didn't conflate success with self-worth. He could pivot, change alliances, and adapt because he wasn't clinging to a fragile self-image. He approached life like a chess player, moving pieces strategically on a board. That's the clarity you must cultivate, the ability to adjust, to accept mistakes, not out of humility, but to maintain effectiveness. Although this sounds straightforward, it's a rarity. Many would rather cling to being right than adapt and win. That's not clarity, that's vanity. But here's the most compelling aspect. The clearer your thought process, the more liberated you become. You free yourself not only from poor choices, but also from mental shackles, overthinking, regret, paralysis, and the need for approval. Clear thinking doesn't guarantee that you'll always make the right choice. It ensures that you understand why you made a particular decision. Over time, this understanding translates into a power that others cannot touch. Yet there remains one Machiavellian clarity technique that few ever employ. But once you do, your thinking becomes nearly invulnerable. It's known as perspective reversal, and it's not what you might expect. When most individuals attempt to step into someone else's shoes, they simply try to empathize with that person's feelings. However, Machiavellian perspective reversal is strategic. It involves contemplating the mindset of those who would benefit from your failure, using that insight to fortify your decisions. Frequently ask yourself, if someone wanted to see me fail, what would they advise me to do right now? This single inquiry shifts your mental gears. You begin to identify your blind spots, recognize convenient narratives, emotional shortcuts, and pressure points. Imagine you are presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You feel flattered and tempted, but then you reverse your perspective. What would someone trying to manipulate you hope you believe? That you're exceptional? That you need them? That you lack time to think? That you cannot refuse? Suddenly the haze lifts. You can see the bait, and instead of being ensnared by emotions, you begin to observe tactically. This is the Machiavellian talent, not just to think clearly from your own perspective, but to understand the adversarial viewpoint, to see through the lens of the puppeteer. If you can map out how someone else wants you to think, you're no longer trapped in their design. You're breaking free from it. That is the essence of true freedom. Mental liberation, decision-making that is self-directed rather than externally manipulated. However, this process demands that you ask difficult questions. Clear thinking is not a gentle endeavor. It's a spotlight illuminating your own delusions. Are you prepared to confront the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be? What revelations await you on the other side of this clarity? Are you ready to face the uncomfortable truths that lie ahead? What insights will emerge once you embrace this newfound clarity? If you shy away from discomfort, you'll find yourself retreating back into the comforting embrace of delusion. To break free from this cycle, consider these challenging questions, queries that Machiavelli himself might have contemplated before taking significant action. Am I pursuing this path because it's wise, or simply because it's convenient? Am I safeguarding my future or merely protecting my reputation? Who stands to gain if I choose not to act? What truths am I reluctant to acknowledge? If a more astute observer were watching me, what would they mock? Initially, you may not appreciate the answers you uncover. Yet, that's precisely how you know they hold value. The journey to power is often lined with moments of discomfort that many choose to evade. But once you train yourself to embrace these moments, something remarkable occurs. Your emotions cease to hijack your decision-making process. This isn't achieved by suppressing your feelings, but rather by seeing through them. You begin to identify when your anger is being provoked, when your desires are being manipulated, and when your fears are being artificially constructed. Once you grasp these mechanisms, you become immune to their influence. Machiavelli advised rulers to study not just virtues, but also vices. His intent was not to promote immorality, but rather to comprehend the nature of power. If you fail to understand the workings of greed, you risk being blindsided by it. If you don't recognize how cowardice manifests, you may mistake it for wisdom. If you overlook your own capacity for deception, you'll struggle to see when you're being misled. Clear thinking transcends moral superiority. It is about achieving functional understanding. Once you adopt this mindset, every interaction becomes a roadmap. Every conflict reveals a clue, and every mistake serves as a blueprint. You stop merely reacting to life. Instead, you begin to dissect it. However, beware of a significant pitfall: clarity without action. Clear thinking is meaningless if it doesn't lead to decisive action. This is where many so-called intelligent individuals falter. They can analyze, debate, and critique, but they fail to take the leap. They fear imperfection and seek guarantees, desiring every variable resolved before they proceed. This isn't clarity. It's paralysis masquerading as caution. Machiavelli didn't just think clearly. He acted decisively, even amidst uncertainty. Clarity isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing enough to take action. When you act from a place of clarity, even if the outcome is unfavorable, you do so on your own terms. You don't spiral into despair. Instead, you recalibrate. Clear thinkers don't romanticize their intelligence. They anticipate being wrong at times and plan accordingly. This isn't pessimism. It's a preference for adjusting after taking action rather than stagnating in pursuit of perfection. So, if you've been hesitating over a decision, let this moment serve as your catalyst. You don't need absolute certainty. What you require is clarity, freedom from emotional clutter, external pressures, and borrowed judgments. Once you achieve that clarity, take action. If things don't go as planned, you'll still possess the insight necessary to recover. That's what Machiavelli would have admired. Not flawlessness, but the ability to maintain momentum under pressure. And here's an additional edge, a concept seldom discussed in relation to clear thinking: the importance of auditing your environment. Clarity isn't solely an internal affair. It extends to your surroundings. If your environment is chaotic, filled with conflicting signals and distractions, your mind will reflect that disorder. If your space is cluttered, your thoughts will be as well. If your social circle consists of turbulent individuals, your confidence will wane each time you seek to make a decision. Machiavelli surrounded himself with thinkers, readers, and influential individuals, not those who offered comfort or flattery, but those who posed challenges. Why? Because clear thought thrives on friction, not ease. Take a moment to evaluate your surroundings. Who becomes defensive when you express your opinions? Who pressures you to rush your decisions? Who ridicules your moments of silence? Who stands to gain from your confusion? These are the individuals you must distance yourself from. For clarity flourishes in environments that promote elevation, space, and stillness. Once you create that space, you'll notice a transformation. You'll stop seeking advice from those who haven't earned your respect. You'll cease fearing mistakes because your mind will be sharp enough to rectify them. You'll abandon the need to predict every outcome, as your internal compass will finally be aligned. Gradually, and without fanfare, you will evolve into a rare individual, one who doesn't feel compelled to justify their choices, as those choices were not made for the sake of impressing others, but rather to achieve victory. However, there remains one final Machiavellian perspective, one that transforms every setback, betrayal, and delay into a strategic advantage. This is the art of strategic integration, the ability to weave chaos into clarity. Most individuals compartmentalize their lives into two categories: the good that serves them and the bad they wish to forget. But Machiavelli viewed life differently. He perceived every loss, every act of betrayal, and every humiliation as valuable intelligence, not something to erase, but rather to assimilate. Once you reinterpret pain through a strategic lens, it becomes a teacher far more honest than success ever could be. Let's delve deeper. When faced with betrayal, most people ask, "Why did this happen to me?" A Machiavellian mindset, however, inquires, "What signals did I overlook? What motivations did I underestimate? What vulnerabilities were exploited?" This shift in perspective transforms your healing process into an opportunity for growth. Now, instead of merely recovering, you are enhancing your understanding. Your clarity deepens rather than diminishes. Consider a plan that has faltered. While many may crumble, blaming themselves or external circumstances, a clear thinker analyzes the situation. Was the timing off? Did I misjudge the leverage? Did I act out of pride rather than necessity? In this way, failure ceases to be a setback. It becomes a refinement of your mental framework. This is where clarity evolves into something anti-fragile. Every experience, even the most challenging ones, sharpens your insight. So, will you embrace this transformative journey, or will you remain shackled by uncertainty? The choice is yours, and the stakes have never been higher. So, will you embrace this transformative journey, or will you remain shackled by uncertainty? The choice is yours, and the stakes have never been higher. Here lies the Machiavellian truth. Confusion thrives in solitude, while clarity emerges through confrontation. You don't hone a blade by concealing it. You refine it by exposing it to resistance. The same principle applies to your thought process. If you shy away from confronting your mistakes, contradictions, and fears, your mind will remain dull, secure, predictable, and ultimately powerless. But when you dare to revisit moments of regret, like the times you said yes when you should have said no, or when you allowed someone back into your life despite their past behavior, you begin to transform that pain into clarity. Each painful memory, when examined honestly, becomes a lesson embedded in your decision-making, enhancing your instincts. You'll start to operate not on mere reactions, but on refined judgments. This is the instinct that Machiavelli cultivated through experiences of political exile, betrayal, and the intricate psychological games of Renaissance power. It's a skill you too can develop, provided you're willing to confront your mental losses instead of burying them. But here's the twist. Once you've integrated that pain into your psyche, you'll notice a shift in how you present yourself. Your words will become fewer yet sharper, your pauses longer and more impactful. Your affirmatives will become rare, while your negatives will be unyielding. People may not pinpoint the exact change, but they will intuitively sense the difference between someone who merely knows and someone who truly understands. This brings us to a crucial truth that many thinkers shy away from. Clear thinking alters your energy. It's not merely a cognitive shift, it's a transformation of presence. When you walk into a room grounded in genuine clarity, there's no need to prove yourself, over-explain, or dominate discussions. You already comprehend the game you're playing, and more importantly, you understand why you're playing it. Machiavelli was not just a manipulator. That interpretation is overly simplistic. His obsession lay not in control for its own sake, but in the survival that comes from self-governance. He held the belief that a man who fails to govern himself will inevitably be governed by others. This principle resonates through every Machiavellian insight. You must take ownership of your mind, or risk someone else seizing that control. To think clearly and act like a strategist, you need to cultivate a mindset that no one can quietly manipulate. This means letting go of emotions that do not lead to action, ceasing the collection of advice you're too intimidated to apply, and making choices based on your true advantage rather than on how others perceive you. You become your own filter, compass, and guiding star. From this empowered position, you'll find victory even before the world takes notice, as the battle is won in the mind long before it's fought on the field. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed, when thoughts spiral, options seem endless, and pressure builds, ask yourself the Machiavellian question that dispels confusion. What move safeguards my position without necessitating an explanation? This question cuts through the noise, eliminating about 90% of distractions. While it may not yield the most glamorous answer, it will provide the clearest one. From that clarity, everything else becomes simpler. When your mind is unclouded, life transitions from being reactive to becoming a navigable map. If you persist in refining that map, honing your filters, and transforming every pain point into a source of strength, you'll evolve into the kind of thinker that Machiavelli would have regarded with trepidation. You won't be loud, emotional, or easily provoked. You'll be formidable. After all, there's no need to shout when your mind is orchestrating moves that go unnoticed. At that juncture, a profound shift occurs. You no longer think merely to feel good. You think to gain clarity. This distinction, though imperceptible to most, forms the bedrock of every powerful intellect throughout history. Let me illustrate what this looks like in practice. When faced with an insult, the average person asks, "How do I defend myself?" In contrast, a clear thinker ponders, "What do they want me to feel? And what if I refuse to feel that way?" When confronted with a difficult choice, most individuals worry. What if I make the wrong decision? A clear thinker, however, considers which option aligns with their long-term interests, even if it entails short-term discomfort. When the world insists, choose a side, a clear thinker questions who stands to gain from this binary choice, and who benefits if I choose silence. This is the essence of Machiavellian clarity. It's not about having all the answers, but knowing which questions dismantle the traps laid before you. Most traps aren't constructed from rope or steel. They're woven from ideas, poorly framed, emotionally charged, and urgent ones. If you don't train your mind to recognize the framing before reacting to the content, you're setting yourself up for failure. You'll find yourself entangled in fabrications, fighting battles that hold no significance, and making decisions within constraints designed by others. This is precisely why Machiavelli approached ideas with skepticism. He interrogated them, dissected them, and most importantly, he scrutinized their origins. This level of clarity is a rare achievement, the capacity to perceive the intellectual power dynamics at play. You'll never think clearly if you overlook one fundamental truth. Every idea serves someone's interests. Every value, every rule, every narrative is crafted with an agenda. The question is, do they stand to gain more from it than you do? When someone advises you to forgive quickly, whose interest does that truly serve? When you're told that prioritizing your own needs is an act of selfishness, who truly benefits from that mindset? When guilt creeps in as you pursue your own path, Who instilled that sense of obligation in you? Clear thinking doesn't merely question ideas, it scrutinizes their origins. By tracing an idea back to its roots, you begin to recognize that many of your mental patterns aren't inherently yours. They were implanted within you, and until you actively remove those influences, they'll continue to dictate your choices, even when you believe you're in control. This is the unsettling truth that many shy away from. Our minds are malleable, and if you don't take charge of your thoughts, someone else has already programmed them for you. So, take a moment to reflect. Every time you say, "I should," or feel, "I can't," pause and consider. Whose voice is that echoing in your mind? More often than not, it's not your own perspective. It could be that of a parent, a teacher, societal norms, a trendsetter, a fear, a past relationship, or a systemic influence. Until you pinpoint these voices and scrutinize them as you would suspect financial fraud, achieving mental clarity will remain elusive. You'll merely mimic thought while executing someone else's agenda. This is the ultimate breakthrough. It's not just about sharpening your intellect or strategizing effectively. It's about achieving such profound clarity that your inner dialogue becomes genuinely yours. When that occurs, your mind transforms into a territory that you own, manage, and protect. From then on, you can pause without anxiety. You can experience loss without being shattered. You can achieve victory without boasting. You can observe without being affected. You can step back without making a scene. You can make choices without chaos. You can act without justification. This is what Machiavelli envisioned for those who wield power, not merely to outthink others, but to cultivate such clarity that no one could manipulate their thoughts against them. And if you nurture that clarity gradually, rigorously, and purposefully, your subsequent decisions won't just be intelligent. They will be invulnerable, because they won't stem from external pressure. They won't arise from fear. They won't even be driven solely by logic. Instead, they will originate from clarity that you've painstakingly earned. And once clarity is achieved, it becomes the one possession that can never be taken from you. Not through guilt, not by force, and not even through love. The moment your mind belongs to you, victory is already yours. Every choice you make afterward is simply a quiet affirmation of that triumph. If the complexity of this concept truly blew your mind, click the like button in support of this profound inquiry. Don't let the algorithm decide what you see. Subscribe now and hit the bell to guarantee you catch our next big story. And in the next video, we'll discover how to think like Machiavelli, his 9 laws from The Prince.